This year was such a great year for games. So much to the point where instead of doing my usual top 5 best, I am doing a top 10. This doesn't happen very often. I think the last time I did a top 10 was in 2018, I think. Yeah, this is the best year in gaming in quite a few years. Even with the top 10 that I have, I still missed a couple really great games, like Alan Wake 2 and Spider Man 2. I hear are both really outstanding sequels that are arguably even better than their predecessors. I also heard that Lies of P is a very underrated, solid Souls like, and probably the closest we'll ever see to a Bloodborne 2. Anyway, on to my top 10. Oh, but first, a couple honorable remaster mentions. It's not uncommon for certain older games to hold up better than 95% of trash coming out now, but no other game I feel can back up that claim as heavy as Metroid Prime. 21 years later, this remaster of the GameCube classic plays just as phenomenal as it did back then. Metroid Prime Remastered is the best game of the year that didn't actually come out this year. And honestly, Quake 2 Enhanced Edition isn't far behind it either. Shit, this was actually my very first time playing Quake 2. Why didn't anyone tell me it was as equally awesome as the first Quake? Literally. It even has the BFG from Doom. Anyway, on to my actual top 10. Number 10, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. For those of you who are wondering why the hell this game is barely even on my list, when it's on like the top 3 of everyone else's, I have a couple confessions for you all. I'm just not a big fan of Zelda. Never really got into them, and my distaste for huge open world games has only grown more and more sour over the years. So these new Zelda games specifically aren't really my cup of tea, and unlike the other 9 games on this list, this was the only one that I felt overstayed its welcome. However, there is one really big reason that this still makes the cut. Link's new arm abilities. Shit, I love playing around with Ultra Hand, gluing things together and trying to get around and making your own form of transportation, even though the physics often make it a pain in the ass. But I really applaud what they were going for here, adding actual creativity to the existing Breath of the Wild formula, along with expanded exploration in the skies and in the depths. I also really dig recall, or rewind, which I feel is a more appropriate term, where you rewind the time of certain objects as a means to getting across a gap or solving a puzzle. There's also the ability to fuse objects to weapons to turn them into something more, like a rock hammer that can destroy obstacles that are in your way, or a fan to help you gain momentum downstream. But I think the most impressive new aspect is Ascend, where Link can jump through any viable ceiling space and come out directly above. This is what ultimately won me over. I am seriously impressed how the game manages to link each and every coordinate in the map between the depths, overworld, and sky islands. All of these unique abilities actually play a key role in letting you play how you want to, or even solve puzzles as creatively, or in my case, as lazily as possible. Sometimes I'm proud of myself after playing this game for a couple of hours. Sometimes I feel like a complete fucking idiot. Number 9, RoboCop Rogue City. Yeah, laugh it up. I rank RoboCop higher on my list than Zelda.
Hey, listen!
I wasn't kidding in my review when I was showcasing how hard this game slaps in terms of fan service and faithfulness to the source material. It takes place between RoboCop 2 and 3, and yet still finds ways to be just as heavy on quality as the first movie. It just hits almost all the right notes when it came to role playing as the part man, part machine himself. RoboCop Rogue City is a great game because it's the best a RoboCop game can be, given with such a low budget. It encapsulates the feeling of being what it's meant to be like no other, regardless of what modern game conventions tell us what certain games should be designed like. Fuck that philosophy, because look at all the other shitty shooters that came out this year. Then look at this. This is the best shooter experience of 2023. Number 8. Dead Space Remake. There's not really much to say about this that hasn't been said already. Dead Space Remake is a near-perfect refinement and overhaul of the first Dead Space game from 2008. Isaac has dialogue now, the USG Ishimura is now free to openly explore between chapters, it takes the arguably superior Zero-G gameplay from Dead Space 2, and necromorphs are encountered at far more unpredictable times than before. Combined with new cutscenes, outstanding visual effects, and terrifying sounds from around the corner or above, the Dead Space series has never been better than this. Number 7. Final Fantasy XVI. I think we can all agree that this game's biggest flaw is that it does not play like an RPG. It is an action game with light role-playing elements. And so, it's completely understandable why this new entry divided fans of the franchise. Here's the thing, though. While Final Fantasy XVI may not feel like a proper Final Fantasy game, it is an incredible action game with some of the tightest and most responsive controls I've ever experienced playing a game of this hack and slash type. It does retain similar aspects of what these games are all about. The story explores themes of power, corruption, slavery. The art style, visuals, and music are all as whimsical and powerful as ever, but there are noticeable changes, like the mature themes. It's violent, pervasive, and sensual. Final Fantasy XVI is a very bold game, dare I say maybe even the darkest and most controversial in the series. Fair enough. It doesn't change the fact that I enjoyed all 60 plus hours I spent on it, though. I still highly recommend it, as long as you can get past the occasionally forced F-bombs.
Fuck! 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 Fuck!
Number 6. Sea of Stars. It isn't very often we see a studio declare itself as a voice of the people, pledging to create pieces of nostalgia for the sole purpose of taking us back to the golden era of games. Sea of Stars is simply a love letter for everyone who grew up playing old JRPGs on their Super Nintendo, with a few quality of life improvements to still give us a fresh, new, updated feeling. Between this and Sabotage Studios' previous game, The Messenger, the results speak for themselves. Containing intensity, comedy, and in its deepest moments of tragedy and grief, Sea of Stars is an easy recommendation. And even though I didn't like the Wheels minigame at first when I reviewed it, it's since become one of my favorite minigames in recent memory. There have been so many great indie games lately encapsulating the simplicity and innocence of our youth, and Sea of Stars is no exception. Feeling nostalgic yet? Get Sea of Stars. Number 5. Super Mario Bros. Wonder! Oh, wow, that must be one of the worst Mario impersonations ever. Although I wonder if it's any worse than Chris Pratt's Mario. Super Mario Bros. Wonder has got to be the best 2D Mario has ever been since Super Mario World on the SNES. I'm not even exaggerating here. While it is a bit on the short side, about 10 to 12 hours if you're like me and have no one to do the co-op levels with, it is incredibly rich with new ideas in regards to gameplay and level design. It does a damn good job making sure it never gets remotely stale, even by the time the last boss is beaten and the credits roll, featuring new forms to take on, new dynamic environments that can change on a whim, and multiple characters to choose from. Mario Wonder is the best, most fun goddamn platformer I've played in years, and dare I say, the best console exclusive of 2023. Better than Zelda, better than Final Fantasy, and I'm willing to bet my entire savings account that it's better than Spider-Man 2, Forza, and Starfield as well. I only wish the single-player content lasted just a little longer.
Slow Jiggly!
Number 4, Street Fighter 6. In all my decades of having played a good variety of fighting games, from Street Fighter 2 on the Genesis to Soul Calibur on the Dreamcast, one thing always stuck out to me. Fighting games have rarely, if ever, had sufficient content to match even the highest quality fighters that I just mentioned. Not only that, but I always observed fighting games as a more niche and hardcore genre that limits their market on home consoles. That, or maybe I just suck at fighting games. Either way, Street Fighter 6 breaks this age-old cycle by offering a massive, free roam campaign containing dozens of hours of good content, featuring some of your favorite characters from the past, the ability to bond with all of them, learn their moves and their backstories, all the while mastering their fighting style. I had to have spent close to 80 hours just maximizing my bond with every single one of them. But then the game goes even harder by implementing the option for a modern control scheme. This basically eliminates the requirement of more complicated button inputs to perform special moves and combos, thus breaking boundaries and making the game more approachable and accessible for casual players or people who are just new to fighting games. It's hands down my favorite new accessibility tool introduced this year in gaming. Never mind the countless different online match modes, along with a collection of some of Capcom's great early works. There is something for everyone in Street Fighter 6. It isn't just the best fighting game of the year. It's one of the best fighting games ever made, or at least certainly one of the most progressive. It is kind of silly how unbalanced and unfair avatar battles can be, though. Like letting my 96 campaign guy mop the floor with a newbie. Look at this, I'm using Rashid. Wah, 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 wah. Number 3, Blasphemous 2. This has got to be the most overlooked indie game of the year. I almost can't help but feel like most don't even know about this game, like it just flew under everyone's radar but mine. Blasphemous 2 goes beyond just the usual better than the first in every way thing that sequels are supposed to be, but it's the very structure of its interconnected Metroidvania slash Souls-like world that I'm in love with, in addition to its level of refinement over the original. This is ultimately one of the most unforgettable Metroidvanias I've played in years. The weapons all serve their own unique purposes in terms of both combat and traversal puzzles. The music, which, by the way, is my favorite soundtrack of the year, is amazing, and the atmosphere and art style is, like the first game, just so fucking creepy and bizarre and violent and gory. I love it. I love it so much. It's so freaky, and I'm into freaky. Uh, I, I, I should probably leave that part out. Ah, screw it. Yeah, check out Blasphemous 2, people.
Fuck this shit.
Number 2, Resident Evil 4 Remake. I'll admit, since the original Resident Evil 4 has aged fairly well, I was a bit skeptical about the need for a remake of this, as I hardly put much thought into what Capcom can do to really improve the fundamentals. And even though I still would have preferred they had remade Code Veronica instead, I still ended up loving every little juicy bit of Resident Evil 4 Remake. I loved the improvement of the pacing, with more emphasis on the village part and less of the castle. There were considerably less implausible or downright silly moments, and I especially loved the introduction of knife parrying and countering. Even though the game's launch felt a bit incomplete compared to its original counterpart, they made up for it over time by delivering a delicious Mercenaries mode that is probably even more addicting now than ever before. I did just about everything here. I got at least an S rank in all stages with all playable characters, with my highest grade being an S++ from the ever so overpowered Hunk. I think my personal favorites to use, though, were Krauser and Wesker. God, I loved being able to transform as Krauser into monster form, cutting everything down in my path, and Wesker's superhuman matrix speed and kung fu, countering with your bare hands will never be anything short of badass. And last but definitely not least, there was Separate Ways, which I can't forget to also mention that this was an incredible year for DLCs. We had God of War Valhalla, Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty, this, and aside from Ada's voice actor still sounding lazy as shit, I still loved every bit of this as well. They ended up putting most of the cut content from the main game and neatly shuffled them in here, which was really cool of them to do. I find it funny how a $10 DLC kept me busy longer than the entire Resident Evil 3 remake. Oh, Capcom. What a successful year they've had, though, between this and Street Fighter 6. Seriously, good for them. Number 1, Baldur's Gate 3. Holy hell, where do I even begin explaining as to why this is not only my game of the year, but possibly the best RPG I've ever played, period. I can think of countless, but I'm going to keep it as short and sweet as possible. I don't think it's going to happen though, especially since I didn't have a chance to review it. I'm relatively new to Dungeons and Dragons, so maybe this is just me speaking on behalf of myself missing out on how in-depth all the systems are. Maybe this game simply spoiled me by offering everything on the table at once. This could very well be. There are so many different layers to this game in terms of both storytelling and gameplay that it almost feels never ending. The story is 100% in your control and in your actions. Even what could feel like a small action could end up having severe and irreversible repercussions down the road. Ignoring certain quests altogether will cause failure if you do something else that negates the previous goal. It lets you know that it has no intention of ever holding your hand or suggests you do one thing over another. It even goes as far as to letting you miss out on meeting certain party members altogether. I can only speak for myself when I say that this instilled a strong sense of wanting to replay the whole game, long before my first playthrough was even over. Out of all the outstanding video games to come out this past year, this is the only one that I can see myself continue playing for years to come, just so I can experience everything across many uniquely different playthroughs and playstyles. On top of the ridiculous amount of player freedom in the narrative is an equally ridiculous amount of actions you can do both in combat and interacting with the world. I've never seen a game with so many fail-safe mechanics before. There will always be something you can do to better a situation if you find yourself soft-locked. For example, say you killed someone by accident who was important to progressing in a quest. You can cast a spell or a scroll to talk to their spirit instead and get information out of them posthumously. You can also even speak to animals that may have been a witness to an investigation you're leading. Or if there is a certain fight you find too challenging for your current party, you can disband from your crew and cast an invisibility scroll or potion to sneak past the guards in turn-based mode to grab what you need. Don't have enough dexterity to pick this really secured lock? It won't be a problem with a certain open sesame scroll at hand.
Say hello to my new friend! You wanna play rough?
These are just a few examples out of hundreds. That's not to mention the many, many crazy things you can do in battle, like throw enemies at other enemies, or turn enemies into sheep. Sheep? And of course the ever so satisfying ploy of getting into the right position just to push someone to their untimely death that never gets old. Baldur's Gate 3, to me, is the most obvious choice for Game of the Year, simply because it gives you all the tools to play how you really want to play. It's one of the very few games ever created where if you think you can do some crazy shit that pops into your head, you're most likely able to do it in the game. That, and it pretty much checks off all the boxes to what makes any and all games great. A well-crafted narrative, good music, good art direction, ingenious and multi-layered gameplay, companions with worthwhile story arcs, not to mention some of the best voice acting I've ever heard in video games, especially from Neil Newbon, the voice actor of everyone's favorite breakout star, Asterion.
After 200 years of shit, pure shit, I think I deserve something better.
So yeah, this has been an outstanding year for games. I luckily didn't play any really bad games this year. However, I am aware that there have been a few really, really bad games. Like, let's see, there was a bad Lord of the Rings game, a bad King Kong game, a bad Walking Dead game, a bad vampire game, and a bad Call of Duty. So yeah, I guess those are my top 5 worst games of the year, and I didn't need to play any of them to let you guys know. I might even make a little top 5 worst slideshow. Top 5 worst games that were so bad I didn't need to play them to know they were bad. What are your favorite games of this year? Comment down below if you want to share, and like always, thank you for watching. The Gamer Gods!
After 200 years of shit, pure shit!